This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD Marcus McLaurine, bassist, jazz bassist. Welcome, Marcus.
Oh, it's good to be here with you. Yes, finally.
So, Marcus, how long have you been playing uh, bass?
Well, I've been playing bass probably since I was about 15 years old, 15, 16. And I just had a birthday, May 7th. I just turned 73.
Oh,
That kind
oh,
of
wow.
puts that in perspective.
Wow, happy birthday. Have you, was that your
Oh, thank
first?
you.
Oh, you're welcome. Was bass your first instrument, or you played something in the beginning? Something else in the beginning?
Well, I played baritone horn first in elementary school. And I actually liked the baritone horn, but what happened when my father was in the military,
Mhm,
and when he got restationed at another base, the other school that I went to didn't have a baritone horn.
mhm.
So they basically I wasn't able to continue because they didn't have a horn.
Oh,
So I basically just started playing. Well, my parents had gotten me a guitar for Christmas, and I kept playing just the top four strings on the guitar.
mhm,
So I figured maybe I'm a bass player, not a not a guitar player. But maybe I'm a bass player. And
mhm.
so I actually went out. I actually was living in Germany at the time, and I bought my first electric bass when I was about 15, 16.
Did you,
And that was probably around 1960. No, I'm gonna say that's probably around 1966, 67.
wow. Was it, you heard some musician, right? Play the bass and that inspired you to go out and get a bass yourself?
No, I knew that the bass guitar only had four strings.
Mm,
So I figured maybe that's what I try to play, maybe, a four string, instrument. So that's what made me want to go and try see if I could play the bass. So I
mm.
bought my first bass was Paul McCartney Hofner bass. And I'm still a big Beatles fan.
Mm.
And so that's the bass that Paul McCartney played was the Paul McCartney Hofner. And
Oh,
that was my first bass I bought when I was when I was living in Germany.
so you knew that Paul McCartney played that bass, so and you actually sought it out. You like the sound.
I actually like the bass sound, and that particular bass, that was the bass that he played, all those like when I actually saw the Beatles actually on the Ed Sullivan show.
Oh,
I think it was like probably around like maybe around 1963, 64.
mm.
And that's when I became like a Beatles fan. And that's when I really and those a lot of those recordings, I think that he may have used that Hofner on those recordings, those early Beatles recordings.
Were on the Ed Sullivan show, was that the first time that they did they just arrive in the U.S. the Beatles and then
That's
they had
right. That,
oh wow, so you saw a historic
that was
show
the
then.
no. Oh no, I remember when they first came for the first time, on the Ed Sullivan show. So
Uh-huh.
I became a very big. I'm still like I said to this day still a huge Beatles fan.
Hmm. How does the Beatles influence your compositions? Because you write a lot.
Well, the Beatles, what I like about their writing is because their songs were very melodic
Hmm.
and they always had like pretty harmonies and like, like Lennon McCartney. I mean, the songs that they wrote were like classic, like Michelle and even George Harrison. I liked his writing a lot too. He was also, their songs had like pretty melodies, pretty harmonies. And also the lyrics were very beautiful also, the songs that they wrote are like classic.
So you like the message in the lyrics too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's actually a group that I was involved with called Native Soul, and we did a Beatles song called, I actually did an arrangement of Nowhere Man uh, in 5/4 time, you know. But there's actually the horn player in the group, Peter Brandon, also is a Beatles fan. So we both would take Beatles songs and rearrange them for the group.
When did you start composing your own music, and then uh, what inspired you to compose your own?
Well, I've always liked writing, songwriting. I've always been a songwriter for, for many years, and I've always enjoyed like just creating melodies. And like I said, I've been very much influenced by people like Lennon and McCartney, and also I'm a huge Stevie Wonder's fan. I love Stevie's
Mhm,
songs. He writes also beautiful melodies and beautiful lyrics. Um, and even like people like Carole King. I'm a huge Carole King fan. I mean, I love her music, I mean, her songs are very powerful, Joni Mitchell, Um, even like I know even Bob Dylan, it's a great lyricist.
Were you a poet before you actually started writing, composing? Um, did you ever write just poetry without the music?
It's funny. I don't really consider myself a poet. I don't think I ever really wrote poetry. I used to like to write,
Mhm.
Um, but
What did you
sometimes
write?
I used to, as a matter of fact, I used to write for the school paper, my school paper when I was going to high school. I graduated high school in Utah,
Mhm,
and I had moved from California and came kind of like in the middle of the term,
mhm,
and they decided to put me on the school paper, and this is like I say in Utah. And this is like, and I graduated high school in 1970, so it was interesting that I would go and see basketball games, and I would do write-ups on the different events that happened on the school campus. So I actually always enjoyed writing, just I just enjoyed writing. So
So
sometimes
did
lyrics
they
would just come to me.
mhm. Well, when for the school paper, were you already kind of socializing with them, or how did they find you?
Well, like I said, well, I have to kind of go back a little bit. My father was in the military for 24 years,
Mhm,
and when he retired, he moved to Los Angeles, and we moved to a place called Compton. You probably heard of Compton.
mhm,
Compton was like where I think Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, that's where but they were like I don't think they even were born when I was there, or they were like kids when I was. They were like infants. But anyway, Compton is a pretty rough place. So my father wanted to get us out of Compton. He didn't want us to stay there because we were used to being on a military installation that was pretty insulated. So
mhm.
he got a job working for a Job Corps center in Utah. So we moved to Utah. And so when we moved, they decided, I guess they looked at my transcripts and they said they thought that I was maybe would be good for the school paper because my English grades were pretty good.
Mhm.
So they just put me on the school paper, and it worked out nicely because I enjoyed writing for the school paper.
So
Yeah.
you ended up being a musician instead of an English major. Uh,
Right, exactly.
so
But
so
I was still playing. I was actually teaching myself actually how to play bass. I would play along with records and that kind of stuff.
so you learned to play by ear. Did you when was your first time actually having a music class, or maybe learning a music theory?
Well, that was interesting because actually, really, I was really teaching myself how to play because I would play along with recordings. I was actually because I had first was involved with rock and roll, then I got involved with playing blues, then I got playing R&B, like Motown and Stax and the whole funk. I got involved with that, but it wasn't until later when I got turned on to jazz that I started to get interested in like theory and learning how to play scales and understand what scales were. And that didn't happen until really I was going to the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Was living in Omaha, Nebraska at the time. And that's when I really first started learning about music theory.
Was it
But
difficult for
back
you?
then, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Uh,
At that time, there were no jazz camps back at that time. So a lot of learning that you got either learn from other musicians or you had to transcribe off recordings, off LPs at
wow.
that time.
So, was it difficult? Because it seems as if I took music theory too, and it seemed to involve a lot of math, and I got pretty confused. I actually needed a tutor. Was it difficult for you, or were you a natural?
Well, I think I had a certain amount of natural ability. I mean, like the theory can be the advanced theory can be a little difficult, but I was very fortunate that I was around musicians who were actually able to show me and teach me different things that I didn't know about. And so I feel very, very blessed that I was exposed to some really great musicians early on.
You mean you were exposed to their music as you listened and explored, or actual musicians in person, you were exposed to them?
I was actually in person. I was actually exposed to some musicians who I actually perform with who were really great players. And they would always like maybe show me different scales or show me different things on the piano, that would help me in terms of my being able to understand improvisation. And so I was very fortunate in that.
Hmm.
And then also they told me that, you should try to transcribe solos off records, like other instruments, like horn players and piano players, guitar players. And so that's how I really started to develop my musical vocabulary is by transcribing off recording. That was a big part of my learning, was learning off recordings.
Did they have you transcribe for practice for classwork, or did you transcribe and you gave it to someone for them to use?
No, in the beginning, it's actually from my own learning, because like I said, I was living in Omaha, Nebraska, and there was an older bass player who lived in town. So I actually went to his house and I asked him, would he give me bass lessons? And he says, I don't give lessons, and he slammed the door. And so I said, well, I better go do the next best thing. That's when I started to go to records and transcribing. So I started transcribing walking bass lines off records, transcribing solos off records. And I started to little by little start to piece together what was going on harmonically. And I realized that, and walk with just like take walking bass lines, those are just bass players outlining the harmony of, say, the C minor 7 chord or F7 chord or B flat major chord. They would outline the harmony. So I kind of like, through trial and error, figured it out. But then later, as I got more advanced into the music, I did get some lessons, from some, great players. And they would actually help me along. So a lot of it was trial, like trial and error in the beginning, in the very beginning.
So in other words, you actually transcribed it for yourself, so you could study better. And
Exactly.
wow.
Yeah, it was actually for me too, because I really had fallen in love with the music, and I wanted to be able to express myself playing this music. And it's funny because it was this guitar player who actually was from Omaha, was a great guitar player. His name was Billy Rogers. He was a great player, and he would show me different things on the bass in terms of like different scales and like diminished scales and augmented scales. But he also was the first person to turn me on to a jazz group because I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and he said, "Marks, I want you to go hear this bass player." So I went with him to this club. It's called the Tiki Lounge. It was in Los Angeles. It was a very famous jazz club, and he took me to go hear. It was Gene Harris and the Three Sounds. And I didn't know who Gene Harris was, but then I heard them. But the bass player was playing an acoustic bass, upright bass, and so when I heard him play, it just blew me away because he pulled out a bow and he started bowing, and it just was I was just blown away by it, and just the band sounded fantastic. Carl Burnett was on drums, Gene Harris on piano, and bass player was his name was Roland Haynes, so it's from Canada,
Mm.
and great player. And so the next 2 weeks, I went hunting for a bass, and I went and found my first bass in a pawn shop in Los Angeles. I think I paid $150 for my first bass. It was a plywood bass, and that was the first time that I started playing upright bass.
Was it a good instrument? Did it need to get professionally tuned, or did it need any work on it?
I needed a lot of work because playing it upright, because I was only up to that point I was only playing electric bass. So to play an upright bass, you really need some real training for that because you can't really see any of the notes. The notes are you're not visible. So and that kind of as a story actually I wouldn't hurt because I became more like a Ron Carter fan. And Ron Carter, I loved his playing. I used to listen to his recordings he did on CTI with Freddie Hubbard and Herbie Hancock and different musicians. And so I went to go hear him live in Los Angeles at this club called Concerts by the Sea. And he was playing with the New York Jazz Quartet, Frank West on tenor, Roland Hanna on piano, Ben Riley on drums, and Ron Carter. And, I was totally blown away. So I went and on the break, I had got up enough nerve to go speak to him. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Carter, I love your playing, blah, blah, blah. Do you know any books that I can get that can help me uh, learn how to play the upright bass?
Mm.
And he says, in typical Carter fashion, he says, go get Samandel. Samandel is a very famous German method, bass method book. And so and that was the last thing we said. And I went the next couple of weeks or next week or so went and got Samandel. And that's what I started teaching myself out of Samandel, you know.
Wow.
And that book helped me and that book helped me get prepared for when I auditioned for the military band. I was in the military band. I auditioned, and that book helped me get past that audition.
Mm. Well, when you wrote the song Dance of the Crows, did all that transcribing work that you did before, did that influence you at all with the crows? Because crows are often standing on power lines, and
Well, it's funny. I was telling somebody how that came about. Like you mentioned earlier, I was teaching at the Litchfield Jazz Camp, and on this particular camp, on this campus, there were crows all over the campus. And every time that I would try to take a picture of the crows, they would fly away. They wouldn't let me take a picture of them. It was really it was uncanny. And so actually, and I talk about in the line. I don't know if you read the liner notes on the CD, but I talk about how I was showing class how to construct a walking bass line.
Mhm.
So I just put these chords up on the board arbitrarily, and didn't think very much of it. That evening, I went to a lecture series by David Douglas, Dave Douglas, trumpet player, and he gave some very interesting. I guess, how could I say, concepts about how to create music. So I went back later that evening to the board where the chords were that I had written, and I sat down and wrote a melody to the chords I had written earlier that afternoon. And that's how Dance of the Crows, that's how that music came about. It was very arbitrary how it happened.
So you got that melody, it came to you
It
for
came to me. I sat down at the piano and played the chords, and that melody came out. It came out. It was like it was being given to me almost. It was like being. I was like I felt like a conduit, and the music was just coming through me.
Did the crows make any sound? Did they call at each other? And when they flew away, did they make any sound that might have inspired you?
But not that I recall. I just remembered that they wouldn't let me take a picture of them. It was I don't know what. It was really uncanny because and I think I had some musicians with me once, and I said, "Look, and I'm going to try to take a picture." And I tried to take a picture, and they flew away. They actually witnessed it also.
Wow. How many crows were there? Like 20 to 40?
Well, there are at least 20. The campus was full of crows. It was really,
And these
yeah.
were the big crows or the smaller blackbirds?
These are the pretty big sized crows.
They're crows then. Wow.
Yeah, they're good sized crows. Yeah. Are you familiar with crows?
I am, but we don't have that many crows over here. We usually have only blackbirds. What about at the over there? Was it were those crows did they suddenly appear or they have been fixtures in the neighborhood?
Well, it was like this it was on a it was like on a campus of a school campus.
Mhm.
So I don't know if there were, something that was common there or not, but because I was only there for about 1 week,
Oh,
and that whole week they were there for the whole week.
hmm. Well, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you also wrote the Ballad of Sandy Hook, and then you that at first that was a tribute to a young boy that a hit and run victim.
Yes, it was. Yes, I was just talking about him yesterday. His name's Jacob. He was only 10 years old, and he used to come and play with our kids. He used to play with all the kids in the neighborhood. And he one evening was going to, I guess, see his mother at the laundromat, and this guy was running from the police, and he hit and killed him. And it was very tragic. So I went to Jacob's funeral, and it was probably one of the saddest funerals I've ever been to because it was filled with children. And so this song came out when I came home. This song came out. This is what came out from that. And so then I had seen this situation in Sandy Hook, and I saw there was this young girl who was actually in the Sandy Hook massacre,
Hmm.
and it was a video of her on the piano with her brother, and I thought she was just really very beautiful, and so I decided to rename the song "Ballad for Sandy," in her honor also, a
Hmm.
ballad for Sandy Hook and the memory of Jacob also, you know. And it's interesting because I had Russell Malone play guitar on that, and I asked Russell to play on it, and I gave him the music, and he called me that evening. He says, "Marcus, I've been playing this music, and I can't stop crying." He was practicing it and crying at the same time. He called to tell me that.
So somehow you're uh, it didn't seem to be like in a minor key. Was that was the song in a minor key, the Ballad of Sandy Hook?
I think it's in a major key, but I think there are a lot of minor chords in it. But I think it's in a major key though. Yeah.
So how did you feel after you wrote it? Did you have to make many changes, or that it came out by itself and it stayed relatively intact, the original version that you wrote?
The song it pretty much came out what it was because the way that was that I had written it for Jacob, that's really it had no title. It had no title. I just had written it and in his honor, and pretty much that's it's pretty much what it was from the beginning. It just came out, and that's what it was.
So when you write songs, do they more usually come out by themselves, or are there some that you have to work really hard on?
That's a good question. I think some of them, it's funny, some of them really will come out and they'll just come all out at it once. And where maybe there's some others where I have to maybe spend a little bit more time with,
Hmm.
and to develop. But for the most part, they come out. A lot of them just come out all at once, you know. And it's like I'm just acting as a conduit, you know, for them to come through.
So as the songs are coming through you, the conduit, what do you feel? Anything?
Well, yeah, because I'm feel particularly like with the one with Jacob, there's a lot of emotion. Uh, there's a lot of emotion emotion. It was a very, it was a very sad time. And so I felt, I think it was a way for me to be able to express how I felt, And so that song was just a means for me to be able to express how I was feeling at the time. Because you know, he was only 10 years old. He didn't get, did, he couldn't get his life started. And, but that was his fate. That was his journey.
Mhm. So, writing seems to be cathartic for you then.
Very, very, yeah. I guess you heard the child, the Miracle Child also, the same
Yes.
situation. That was written. I literally watched life come into my daughter's body.
Mhm.
He came out. Is the umbilical cord was around her throat, and she was like purple. She was like lifeless. And there was like pandemonium. The doctors, it was like pandemonium.
Mhm.
They said scissors, syringes, they'd try to clear a nasal passage, just cut the umbilical cord. And I literally watched life come into her body, you know,
Mhm.
and witnessing that, that's what that song came out. That song came out.
Mhm.
And a lot of the songs were like that. The songs of when the To CT with Love, that I remember I was dropping my daughter off to school one morning
Mhm.
and that melody was going through my head. And so I came home. I actually sang into my recording on my phone so that I wouldn't forget it.
Mhm.
When I came home, that's when I sat down and wrote out the chords for it.
When you so the after after your daughter was delivered, she was actually stopped breathing because she was like being strangled by the umbilical cord.
That's right. She couldn't get. There was no air able. She was
Oh.
getting oxygen. You know.
Mhm. And
So there's a short window of time. Before, as to
mhm,
get the nasal airways cleared.
mhm. and mhm. and that was all you thought. Like you were, of course, very thankful that she survived,
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
but then the music came to you. Was the music uh, were you in a like a relief mode and a celebratory mood, and then the music came to you, or did you have to yeah, you didn't have to compose much. The whole composition came to you.
I think that was another one where it just because like I said, I was celebratory. We were so grateful, and so my wife obviously couldn't see what I saw, but I was definitely in a celebratory mode. And so when I sat down, because I write from the piano, so when I sat down, that's what came out.
Mhm.
I mean, it just came out, you know, and like it was like to me almost like divine intervention. It was a gift. And
Your album is tributes, and then every song is attributed and is a tribute to someone that was important and is important in your life.
absolutely, absolutely.
What wh- what was the first song that helped you decide that this album would be called Tributes?
Well, I think what happened was after I saw that there was like kind of a tribute to different people, like I wrote the blues for Ron Carter, Ray Brown, and Niels Henning Orsted Pedersen, and I wrote Clark Terry. I worked with Clark Terry for 30 years, and I wrote To CT with Love. So it was like it felt like I needed to pay tribute to these people who had such an impact on my life, my musical life, and personal life. Because Clark was somewhat of he was like a kind of a surrogate father because we were very close.
Mhm. Mhm. And your son joined you in a duet too, correct?
And okay, so you did listen to the record, okay? Yeah, my son, he's actually an excellent bassist. He graduated from Purchase College, and I wanted to make him have him be a part of this recording, you know. And so he told me that he would like to do it. So I said, okay, let's do it. So we got together and start practicing, and he did an excellent job on it.
Did was it his idea that he saw you practicing all the time and then he wanted to be a musician too?
Well, you know, he wanted to be a bit because I didn't really want to push my children to be musicians because it's a very hard lifestyle, you know.
Right.
But one of my students actually gave him an electric bass when he was about maybe like 11 years old. And so he started practicing on his own. And I realized he had a good ear. So he asked me to start teaching him songs on the bass. And that's how it got started. And so he used to go and do different auditions, and they would say, "Yeah, you're in the program." And so he got accepted to Purchase College, and he graduated, got his bachelor's degree in music and performing in performance in Purchase College.
Wow, congratulations to him. So you had a lot of mentors that help you along the way. Once they start rolling in, then there's that linkage, and then you meet more and more. But what about your first mentor or uh, a successful jazz artist that you met, and how did it happen that you were able to meet this person, whoever they are?
Where they were? Well, that's a good question. Also, well, like I say, I met Ron Carter that one
Mhm,
time. You know, we just asked him, you know, about music books. But actually, the first time I heard Clark Terry was I was working with a band in Omaha, Nebraska, and we had a performance up at Lincoln, Nebraska, at the University of Nebraska.
mhm,
So we get to the student union, and it's packed, and there's a trumpet player with a trio playing, you know, on the bandstand.
mhm,
Well, little did I know it was Clark Terry. I didn't know who Clark Terry was, but the drummer was Victor Lewis. Victor Lewis, as you know, is a very famous jazz drummer, but he was a student at the University of Nebraska at the time.
mhm,
And he reminds me that, that year, because I didn't meet Clark that day, but I did meet Victor that day. And he reminds me that was 1972 when that happened.
mhm.
And um, and I didn't join Clark's band until 1981. So 9 years later, I meet Clark Terry, and there's a whole story involved how we met because I was actually in the Air Force Band. I was in the 590th Air Force Band stationed in New Jersey for 4 years. And when I got out, I met a trombone player, Clifford Adams, who invited me to do some gigs in New York. And I did this gig with him up in Harlem at this club. And on the break, he said that Melba Liston's here and she wants to meet you. I didn't know who Melba Liston was. Well, it turns out Melba Liston's a very famous jazz trombonist, arranger. I went over to meet her. She says, I enjoy your playing very much. Would you like to join my band? I said, yes, sir, sure, you know. So I started working with Melba's band. We played Carnegie Hall. We played with a lot of great Dizzy Gillespie joined us, you know, at Carnegie Hall. And but what happened was we weren't working, and towards the end of the year, Clark Terry calls Melba Liston and says, she said, I need a bass player. Who can I call? She says, call Marcus McLaurine.
Mhm,
And that's how I got the job because he called me one night. He says, is this Marcus McLaurine? I said, yes. He says, this is Clark Terry. I said, yeah, sure, right. You know, he said, no, no, this is Clark Terry, you know. I have 2 weeks. I have a week at the Blue Note and I have a week up in Quebec City, Canada. Can you make it? I said, yes. And that's how I got the job with Clark. You know, no rehearsal, no nothing. Just come to the bandstand and play. And that was like 1981, December 1981.
mhm. Wow. So you are very easily inspired to write music. Uh, do you get writer's block at all? And if you do, what instigates it? Did you notice?
Well, that happens sometimes. I go through spells where nothing comes out. But what I'll do is I just go and I'll go listen to music to get inspired, you
Mm,
know. And usually that'll help, just listening to other musicians, other recordings, will inspire me.
mhm, mm.
And, and I think usually if I just stay still, things will start to come through me.
Right.
Mhm.
So, um, uh, actually, it seems it sounds a lot like meditation. You stay still and then you open yourself up to the music that is going to flow through you.
Exactly. Yeah, meditation, music, I treat music like meditation.
Mhm,
And actually, I do a meditation. I actually need to meditate more, but I actually am involved with the meditation. And I think to me, music is like medicine.
mhm,
It heals us, and I feel like if we're writing music that can heal ourselves, then hopefully it will be able to heal other people
mhm.
if they listen to it. Hopefully they'll be healed as well.
Have you ever had the instance where you listen to a song, either someone else's or yours, and it caused you to feel healed? Maybe you were having an unfortunate circumstance at some point in your life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Many times. Yeah, it happens to me all the time. I hear music that is very inspiring to me and very healing to me. And no, to music is a huge part of my life. It's really yeah, it happens all the time. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, you seem to be very thankful because almost all of your tributes, all the tracks, you're showing your appreciation for the various people.
Yeah, now, there's some people I actually left out that I felt, like Kenny Burrell, who was a very big influence also on me, a guitar player, because I used guitar on this particular, and I didn't use horns. I didn't use any horns on this recording. I used guitar and piano and a vocal, Marla Waldron on vocal.
Mhm.
But Kenny was a big influence on me.
When you how do you decide whom to pay tribute to? And uh, y- you seem to be a very thankful person. And then, of course, this album is tributes. But do you feel that oftentimes you write it's almost tributes inspire you the most, or is there something else that inspires you?
I'm not sure if I totally understand. But you mean this particular recording, you mean, or?
Your other writings, you
Oh yeah.
yeah. Do,
Sorry to cut you off. Yeah, I've written other songs also that I feel very, inspired. Actually there's a song that I wrote that I really feel very happy with. It's called "Gift Within." It's
mhm,
in some other recordings. Other groups have recorded it, and that one I've always felt has a very strong message. Also, it's a very very powerful message.
mhm. Yeah, often they say that people say that it's your own demons that are the hardest to overcome sometimes.
Say that again.
So some people say that your own demons, everybody's own demons are the hardest ones to overcome.
Oh yes, yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, well, like I say, I feel very blessed that I've been able to, create music because it's something that feel is a gift, that we're given,
Mhm,
and I feel I feel very blessed to have the opportunity to be able to actually even get this music out
mhm,
because I did this all independently, and I felt like that it was something that I had to do,
mhm,
and a lot of it was in tribute to my mother
mhm,
who when she passed, I felt like, she would want me to do this to make sure that I made a statement with my music.
mhm.
And,
When she was alive, did you play for her?
Oh yeah, she's actually heard me play. She used to, well, I guess one year my father and my mother came. I was on a jazz cruise, and they came on the cruise, and so
Mm-hmm.
they hung out the whole week. So they got a chance to hear me play the whole week.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a big influence on me because of her musical taste.
Mm-hmm.
Both of my parents had really good musical taste. My father used to listen to Duke Ellington,
Mm-hmm.
Count Basie, Frank Sinatra, and also Charlie Prine. And I actually love country and western music too, which people might be surprised, but I love country and western music because country and western music, they tell stories
Mm-hmm.
in their songs, and I really that really appealed to me. That fact that the fact that they would tell stories and they would make you live their stories.
Well, according to the liner notes, most of your tracks and tributes uh, do tell a story as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Each story, each track, I tell you, and you can see I tell a little story about how they came about. The one the track one for OP.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about how one evening at the Village Vanguard, Oscar Peterson came in and sat in with the band, with Clark Terry's band, which was to me was like, that's like a dream come true to be on the same bandstand with Oscar Peterson, who was a big hero of mine. I've always loved Oscar's playing.
Mm-hmm. So when you did you like the complexity of it? What about the Oscar Peterson's music and playing did you like, and how did that influence your your technique and playing?
Well, Oscar Peterson, his groups always they were always very cohesive, you know.
Uh,
The drum, because usually it was mostly in a trio setting. So people like Ray Brown, Ed Thigpen, those classic records, I think it's called We Get Requests. Um, just his harmonic, and he was a master at the piano. So just to be able to, if I could even just do it, it's an inkling of what he does, but he was a true master on the piano and he was able to me convey to the listener his emotional what he was feeling emotionally. He was able to convey that to the listener, you know, and that had a huge impact on me.
do you play the piano too? Do you know how to play the piano as well?
I actually do play piano. I don't call myself a pianist, but I do write from the piano. When I write from the piano.
Mm. Is it
And
easier that way? It's
yeah, for me, because I can actually see everything harmonically, how everything is laid out.
mm,
Actually, piano was actually probably my first instrument, but
mm.
there's a whole story. My parents had given me lessons when I was about maybe seven or eight.
Oh,
But when what happened was we had moved to Virginia. I guess they rented a piano. And I wasn't really playing it as much as they had liked. So I came home one day and the piano was gone.
oh.
And I said, "What happened to the piano?" I said, "Well, we didn't think you wanted to play anymore, so we got rid of it." And so to this day, I have like kind of like a love-hate relationship with the piano. I love the piano, but it's like I won't commit for fear that it's going to be taken away from me or something. I guess on some level, but it's kind of crazy. But I write from the piano. I enjoy writing from the piano.
Mhm. So how old were you when they removed the piano?
Well, I was playing outside with friends. I
Ah,
was probably I was probably around maybe 12, 11 or 12 years old. I was interested in playing outside with my friends.
uh,
So they thought that I wasn't interested anymore and they decided to take it back. So it kind of came as a shock to me because they didn't tell me.
so when they taught you how to play the piano, so they taught you how to read music too?
I mean, in the very beginning, I think I was reading, but I didn't, I didn't play long enough to really develop skills reading. But I later learned how to like read chords and read a little bit on piano.
Mhm. Yes. Oftentimes, a lot of the great musicians they learn by ear, and then some of them don't. I think don't read music at all. But you do.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I like I say, I can read chords,
Mhm,
and I can read, I can like s slowly try to bang out a melody but I wouldn't consider myself a reader.
mhm. But
But I can read chord charts I can read.
mhm. And of course, since you write them, you compose, it's
Right.
hard to get by without actually knowing how to read music and write.
Right, right. Well, that's where the reading comes in. I can write out melodies and write out like lead sheets if I need to get someone else to be able to read something.
What about at Litchfield, the jazz camp? What did you teach over there?
I was teaching actually there. I was teaching I think I might have been teaching some private bass lessons and also like I said I was teaching walking how to construct walking bass lines, that kind of thing. And also I would rehearse ensembles because we all would have different ensembles that we would rehearse also.
Could you explain a little bit more about what a walking bass line is?
Walking baseline actually, and I got this concept actually. I took some lessons with Ron Carter many years later. I took some lessons with Ron, and I kind of used his concept of walking, where he would take chord tones and he would take approach notes a half step above or below the note, and he would use those approach notes to go into the next bar, to the next chord. So it's a way of using where you start to be able to hear the chords, and be able to know how to use the chords and kind of like mix them up, and create your own walking bass line. And so you do it enough, you start to be able to construct your own way of thinking about how to construct a walking bass line. And I was actually fortunate enough many years ago, a bass player gave me like a huge envelope full of walking bass lines, of Ron Carter's lines, actually. And I was actually able to study his lines, and see what he was teaching. And I use this with my students to this day, these walking bass lines that were given to me many years ago.
Are they like kind of like a pattern that holds the composition together, the
Oh,
walking
yeah,
bass
well, the,
line?
well, the bass is the glue. The bass glues everything together. Without the bass, nothing happens. I don't care who's playing. Like you think of all the great bass players like Ron Carter, Charles Mingus, Paul Chambers, you know, Scott LaFaro, all the great players, they were the ones who glued the band together, you know, and it was very important, and particularly Ron Carter with those groups with Miles Davis that he played with, his role was so fundamental in those groups, you know, and to this day, Ron Carter he just had a birthday. He just turned 88 and he's still doing it.
Amazing.
He's an amazing individual. And I still look up to him as a mentor to this day.
So when you have some famous mentors, and then of course when you have a mentor, you don't understand something, you go to them and ask them. So what have you asked Ron Smith?
See that again?
What when you have mentors, you go to them with your questions. So and when you don't understand something, so what did you ask your mentor, Ron?
Well, when I first took lessons with Ron, I just basically wanted just to study with him, and he was, and the book that I told you about, Samandal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the book that he worked out of. We worked out of Samandal, and he showed me he had this sheet that he showed you how to construct walking bass lines. It's like almost like a connect the dot. He had the chords written down, and you connect the chords. You know, and so, but Ron he's very practical. He also wants you to be able to develop your own sound.
Mm-hmm.
And develop your own voice. And ultimately, that's what we all have to do. But yeah, I always, if I have any questions, even people like Rufus Reed, also great. I feel like I can always go and ask them questions if I need to find out something. I could get an answer that would be legitimate.
does one develop their own voice? Because first you learn and then you imitate. But what is the point in a career where you decide that uh, you have to follow and establish your own voice?
And that's an excellent question because I tried to in the beginning to sound like Ron Carter, and I found myself trying to emulate him, and I realized that that's really not what I should be doing. I should really be trying to find my own voice, and that's what I decided to do. As and although I use a lot of I take a lot of different styles, and tried to put them into my style. Like say I mentioned Rufus Reed. I used to go used to listen to Rufus Reed with Dexter Gordon, and I used to listen to him with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band at the Vanguard on Monday nights. But and even people like Buster Williams, those great players, they have each one of them have something that I can use, in terms of how they put their voice together. Most of them all had a great sound, had a big sound, you know, and choice of notes. Like Ron Carter's, he's like the master of it, like playing the correct note. So I don't want to say correct, but playing the right note at the right time. It's a real art, it doesn't come easy. It takes so many years of playing. But then you have to also trust yourself. You have to get to a point where you trust yourself and trust that what you have to say is relevant and valid. And I think once you get to that point where you trust what you have to say, then you can let it flow through you.
Do you remember at what point in your career that you felt that you could trust yourself?
I can't remember the exact day, but I remember I started to get to a point where I felt like this is my voice. Once I got to a point where I felt like that I wasn't trying to sound like anyone else. Once I reached that point, then that's when it happened. And that takes a lot of courage because the tendency is to want to sound and be accepted like someone else, you know. It takes a lot of courage to stand and say this is my voice, this is who I am. And if you like it, great, and I hope you do, but you don't have to.
Do you remember what composition you made once you thought that?
No, I can't really remember any composition, but I think that the fact that I was willing to write and have my voice heard, you know, um, it let me know that I was, particularly the tune I wrote the blues for Ray Brown, Ron Carter, and Neil Sinning. That had been in my head for years, that line, and I finally that didn't come all at once. Also, that took time to develop that. But once I got it all together, it all worked. It all came together, and I think that's part of it right there. I felt like this is my voice, and this is my tribute to Ray Brown, Ron Carter, and Neil Henning Orsted Pedersen. All three of those players who I had heard and listened to extensively.
If you were to describe your voice, how would you describe it?
Say that one more time.
If you were to describe your voice, how would you describe it?
Oh boy, wow. Well, my voice, I think I, I like I like I like the tradition, the jazz tradition, the bebop tradition. I'm a strong proponent of the bebop tradition. Um, Melodies, the American songbook. I love the great melodies, great lyrics, harmonies. I'm just a strong proponent. I just try to let that come through me, you know, that part of the jazz history, come through my music. And some of my music, you might hear some things from other songs. You might hear like little pieces from other songs.
somehow the different pieces of the puzzle fit together.
Yeah, yeah.
If our listeners want to learn more about you, Marcus McLaurin, where should they go?
Well, I do have a website. There's a website that you can go to, marcusmclaurin.com, and there's some things you can hear. Even some compositions you might. Now, also, I have a blog also. I think I told you I've been doing some writing. There's some stories there. Actually been working on my memoirs, my personal life memoirs and my musical memoirs. And I'm hoping to maybe to have those at least one of those finished this year. That's my goal, you know.
Mhm. And uh, where could they find your blog? Is it on your website?
It's on the website. If you go to www.marcusmclaurin.com, you can go and see there's some stories actually on the blog you can check out.
Well, Marcus McLaurin, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you a lot of luck, and we'll talk again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and hope maybe we can do it again.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.